Hey friends, I'm Christy, and you're listening to Rock the Damn Boat, a podcast for women who are done playing small. If you've been shrinking to keep the peace or waiting for permission to want more, climb aboard because we are going to make some waves together. Don't forget to follow or subscribe so you're never left stranded on the shore. And if you want a more connected experience, visit thrivewithchristy.com to learn more about the Thrive Collective, a community that combines boat rocking energy with the grounding effects of yoga and breathwork with live calls and classes. Now on to the show. Okay. First of all, let's address the elephant in the room, and I am not talking about the foreign room that I'm in, although if you were watching this, you will see that I am not in my usual studio. I am traveling again, so I'm doing this Monday mini from Charlotte, North Carolina, where I am here for work. So I didn't want to let another week go by without recording a short episode, and that is the real elephant in the room, is that I have been not recording my short episodes for a couple of weeks now. No other reason than time and travel and having some ideas about things, but not sitting down to record them. And one of the things I am learning about myself after talking to Sandra Primo about the enneagram, if you have not listened to that episode, you should go listen to that episode. She shares a podcast resource called Around the Circle. I went back and listened to some of those episodes, and I am, without a doubt, an Enneagram 9. 9 is the peacemaker. At its core, kind of feels like their voice doesn't matter. So if you know me at all, you know that I have been working on using my voice, really starting with yoga and opening up my throat chakra and learning how it felt and how to use that. Then doing some public speaking courses. Now, of course, this podcast. So I don't feel like I have problems speaking up at all. However, I will still default to maybe saying yes when I want to say no, or not using my voice in certain situations, which is what this week's episode will be all about. I won't always tie back to the Enneagram, but it was interesting because Around the Circle said you might be a 9 if you don't rock the boat. And so, of course, here we are trying to go against the grain, make waves, speak up, because our voice is just as important. That took me back to this idea of boundaries, which has been a buzzword for some time. Brene Brown talked about setting boundaries, and I feel like that word has lost its meaning, or maybe its relevancy today. I am also Gen X, so I don't know whether Gen Z is better at setting boundaries or they're just calling it something different. I don't know. But I want to talk about not saying yes when you really want to say no. And how do we do that? How do we speak up for ourselves? How do we represent our own needs? I found this information from Stanford, which linked me to scienceofpeople.com. And it was an article about how to set boundaries. And one of the biggest revelations I had from this article, because I have given talks on boundaries, it is part of my Thrive program. I have coached on this idea, but boiling it down to 2 words can really help shift the psychology behind boundary setting. When it comes to setting boundaries, and again, we're talking about boundary setting as it relates to saying yes when you want to say no, not preserving your own peace and your time, maybe having FOMO or thinking that you're going to disappoint somebody. So there's all these reasons why you might sacrifice your own well-being. And one of the first things is to get clear on what boundaries might look like. Are you constantly staying late at work, even though that means that you're missing out on something with your kids or with your spouse? Are you constantly saying yes to more projects, even though you are completely stressed out? Are you saying yes to plans with friends that maybe you don't really like those friends all that much, but you don't want to disappoint anybody and you don't know how to foster other friendships? whatever that example might be for you of, I feel uncomfortable down in my body, or it stresses me out mentally to do this thing, whatever it is, spend time with this person, take on this project, um, whatever that is for you, think about what the boundary might look like to set. And the two words that this article suggests is changing from I can't to I don't. So if someone asked you to do something and you said, I can't do that tonight, I've got XYZ to do. First of all, we tend to make excuses or justify why we can't do things. So that is one of the biggest pitfalls of I can't. It's one that I know from experience. No is a complete sentence. I have shared that on the pod before. So you might say, I can't do that. And they're suggesting that you switch that out with I don't. So they give a few examples of how to apply that. And I think that it's great for us to start to retrain ourselves to answer in this way. So instead of, I can't take that project on right now, say, I don't accept last minute assignments. Instead of, I can't talk right now, say, I don't take calls after 7 p.m. Or instead of, I can't deal with this argument, I don't engage in conversations when someone is yelling. Now, for a 9 peacemaker like me, the thought of saying I don't accept last minute assignments gives me panic. Who am I to tell someone that I don't accept last minute assignments? But the point is, if you start to use that language and really look at inside and understand what makes you anxious, and you can start to set some rules around how you might want to behave. So I don't sit at my desk at lunch. That is one that I have talked to people about over and over, and especially in corporate trainings or talking about corporate culture. So many places that we work, everyone sits at their desk for lunch. And when I used to go to New York for work, I'd be like, hey, I'm going to, walk down and get a salad. Like, I'm going to get away from the desk. Does anyone want anything? And everybody kind of did their own thing because most people didn't leave their desk. It's been that way almost my entire corporate career. So it's not as if that company was any different than other companies I worked for. But maybe if someone asks for a noon meeting, you say, I don't set meetings over lunch because I get out at lunch. Or I don't stay after 5 on Tuesdays because there's a yoga class I go to. So it's the idea of switching out I can't for I don't, where it rings true and where it will feel authentic to you, is a great way to set a boundary, in my opinion. So again, those might be things that would be true for me is I don't sit at my desk at lunch, or I don't set lunch meetings because I get out and I take a walk, which isn't true right now because it's 100 degrees outside, but that might be true when the weather cools down. I tell people often, I can't. Now, see, I just caught myself. I will tell people I can't on a Tuesday night because I teach yoga. So my new practice will be to say, I don't make plans on Tuesday nights. I teach a yoga class. So it will be tough for me. And so I'll be interested to hear how it works for you. I'll give you a report back on anything where I find that I'm able to use that example. Now, of course, boundaries are difficult for a lot of reasons. I'll go back to what I said before. No is a complete sentence. And we feel the need to justify it, and we feel the need to rationalize it. But in reality, we are in control of us, and we should not sacrifice our feelings for someone else if it means that it comes at our own expense. And that's where, now I have not read the Mel Robbins book, but the idea of let them, one of the things that I have been learning and using as a mantra lately is I am only responsible for managing my feelings. So if I say something that I am worried might create conflict or might disappoint somebody, I have to remember that I'm managing my feelings and that I might feel a certain way about this situation, and I have to be free to express that. And however that person responds, that is their emotion and their feeling, and I am not responsible for managing that. Now, I am absolutely responsible for the words that come out of my mouth. So if I say to someone, "You're a jerk," and it upsets them, well, I was not polite. Maybe the better thing for me to say is, "I don't appreciate when you XYZ." That allows me to speak in a polite way to express my feelings. And then if that person is still upset and doesn't see it my way, then at least I have said it in a way that is as Colette Fair says, from my sage self. And her episode is coming up Wednesday, and it's amazing. It's from her book, The Cost of Quiet. We talk about that. We talk about how to manage these conversations. So I think that will be an exciting one to listen if you are already having anxiety about what I'm suggesting, about boundaries, about difficult conversations. Now, it also this article also, it's a great article. I'll put a link in the show notes, but it also talks about declining invitations. It talks about setting digital boundaries. It talks about how to handle people who won't take no for an answer. So when we think about boundaries, there are also boundary violators and this idea of people who just will not take no for an answer, who maybe think that they're accepting your boundary and then they don't. And one thing I will add, and I've shared this on the podcast before too, is in recovery, there is a prayer, "Bless them, change me." So if you find that someone is not reacting well to what you're sharing, or it's something that you just have zero control over, because let's face it, we have zero control around how other people behave. There are certain ways in which we influence behavior, but we ultimately are not able to actually manage how somebody is going to behave. But the idea is, if you cannot interact with that person or you can't influence that person, bless them, because they have their own ideas about things. They have their own way of being. They have their own story, their own origin story. So bless them, change me. And you get to try to change your behavior. And sometimes that is ending that friendship. Sometimes that is leaving that job. Sometimes it's ending that relationship. There are sometimes that we have to set really extreme boundaries because that is what is right for us. Now, this article goes on to talk about how to handle people who won't take no for an answer. It goes on to talk about how to set boundaries at work. So clear work hours, especially when you work from home like I do, defining a space that you can close the door and shut work out at the end of the day. So this was interesting because it was something we were talking about as I was leaving the office today. How to set boundaries in relationships, friendships, all of that. This is a really thorough article, and the most revelatory piece for me was the idea of saying I don't versus I can't. So it'll be maybe some homework to think about, what are things that you would really like to, that you hold true to yourself and your core values that you don't want to do, and how can you weave that into the language that you use from here on out. I don't stay late on Tuesdays and Thursday nights. I don't have work meetings over lunch because I have this commitment over lunch. I don't, whatever that looks like. I hope that you are in a situation where you can speak up about those things. I know it can be really difficult, especially if you're worried about job security or a relationship that is really important that needs to be stable. So I know it's not always practical, but I really hope that you will take this to heart, that you will work on little ways to set bigger boundaries in your lives and, rock the damn boat because you have this one life and it should be full and complete and feel whole to you. Thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you again soon. You've been listening to Rock the Damn Boat, a podcast produced and recorded by Christy Hughes. You can follow, subscribe on both Apple and Spotify, and your 5-star review goes a long way. Thank you so much for your support of the show.